Welcome to the Working Without Waste podcast, powered by ERC Midwest, the podcast that's all about sharing ideas and stories that increase your productivity and decrease waste in your business and personal life. I'm your host, Mike Malatesta, one of the leaders here at ERC Midwest. Our guest today is Lynn Corazzi. Lynn is the founder and CEO at Data2Profit Consulting. He's best known as the data magician. He helps companies 2x sales and profits by using untapped data to make better decisions, have greater insights, and develop more powerful strategies. Lynn, thanks for joining us on the Working Without Waste podcast.
Hey, it's absolutely my pleasure to join you, Mike.
So I had the chance to meet Lynn a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, through a mutual, organization or guy that we're affiliated with. And I had a chance to learn what he's doing. And I thought, since this podcast is all about decreasing waste and increasing productivity in your business, that what he's doing with information to help companies grow was something that everyone needed to hear. So why don't we just start, Lynn, by telling folks why you're the data magician and what that actually means.
What it means. Great question. Where did it come from? And became the data magician just trying to explain to different people what it is that I do. And at first I would just tell people, yes, I do data analytics. And I would just watch eyes glaze over. And then someone helped me through and say, you know what you do for people who don't do it, it's absolutely magic. And so we tried to create this framework for me to easily say, you know what I do? I take all this messy data that every company has that they're not looking at, they're not using a whole lot. I do my magic with it, but I show them things about their business that's going to help them increase sales and profits. And at that point in time, everyone says, okay, I get it, because everybody can relate to the idea of having crappy data that they have to work with that doesn't tell them what they need to know. And it's a pain in the butt when they have to go find it.
And I like the way you chose the magician, or someone chose the magician thing for you, because magicians, they're not creating something out of air. They're just preventing you. Regular magicians are preventing you from seeing what's in front of you, right? Go ahead.
I was going to say, I tell people there's no hocus pocus about it. Yeah. All the stuff is there. Anybody can do it, but it, just like the magician has to spend hours and hours developing their craft. Well, you're either wired to do analysis work and work with a lot of data, or you're not.
Yeah.
And I've been in the unique position to actually loving getting into the really details, but yet throughout my career, as I've moved up through organizations, I became both of the consumer of information, but as well as the creator of it. Oh. And so I can kind of see issues from both perspectives, because a lot of times the real data geeks, their biggest thing is, why doesn't the business listen to us? And the business says, well, why don't they tell us what we want to know? And there's this wall that's between them all. Well, I've lived on both sides of the wall, or learned how to tunnel over it. I'm certainly not tall enough to go over it. I tunnel under it, rather.
So I like how you said that you could be a creator and a consumer, because really almost everybody in an organization is a creator and consumer of information, right? So now we all sit we all sit in front of a keyboard, I guess, and we put stuff in all day. Mm-hmm. And then at some point we need to draw that out. And it's almost never frustrating when you're the person just putting it in, because that's just a thing, right? It's when you go and have to pull it out that it begins to be like, what are we doing? Why am I putting this stuff in if I can't get it out easily, and that kind of thing.
And that is really one of the biggest pieces of waste when people talk about their data.
Yeah.
They don't even really think of it as an asset. It's just something that has to happen. And you figure you spend all this time inputting information. Even if you have a couple of IT people, 2 IT people, the licensing that you pay, and the some of the hardware and the upkeep of that, say you got to easily have $250,000, even for a relatively small company that's collecting, protecting, and storing all this information. How much money is actually spent in making people smarter giving them new insights that looks differently. Sure, there are standard reports, your income statement being the most important of them. So, they report your sales. Then you have a sales report that you may give you a list of all the customers or products. But if you want to go beyond that, you have to go into the gory detail to get to it. And the same thing with a KPI. You see a KPI, it looks good till you start trending it, or you still see a blip. Then you got to go back and figure out what is causing it. You have to get into that gory detail, and a lot of times to investigate and truly understand. And that's where people truly get frustrated, because it is so difficult to do, and it takes time to collect, pull it, stage it, clean it before you can actually do with it. In any analysis project, 80% of the time is prepping and staging.
So before we go forward and explore that a little bit more, why don't you tell the listeners how you got to where you are, where you came from, how you got to where you are, how you are in the position you are now to help people.
Sure. I began my career with Procter and Gamble. And I was a finance and accounting person at that point in time. And so I spent 14 years working up and down the P&L, doing brand analysis for some little tiny brands like NyQuil, Oil Volet, and Iams Business. So as I got better at Procter and Gamble, looking at business, trying to figure out what's driving sales, how do you forecast sales. I worked on the manufacturing side. I spent 4 years in one of the P&G's largest plants as their basically site controller. I was the manager of European finances, if you will, for the Iams brand. And so for 14 years, I developed this capability to look at, use, and present and work with leaders on understanding their numbers. I left Procter & Gamble to move to Wisconsin here, joined a company that was about a $500 million business, and started out in manufacturing, finance, and accounting, and redesigned the cost accounting system, taught people that this is how we're going to budget, look at our performance. And shortly after that, I got into the sales and marketing area. And that's really where I got into analytics, because we built from ground up a CRM system and some proprietary databases that truly let us know what was going on in the market. And once you start having people look at that information, you start seeing sales behavior, you see customer behavior, and we had some really cool ideas coming out of that. When I left there, I am now working on my own as the owner of Data2Profit Consulting, bringing all this bigger company experience down to really small up to medium-sized companies.
Okay. I appreciate the background there. Thank you. What and you so at P&G, I'm thinking that a company of that size with those types of brands and the type of resources that they have and what they actually need to run the business, that they might not have messy data. Would that be a good assumption?
No.
Okay. So everyone has messy data at some point.
Yeah, I mean, everybody does, because I think larger companies have certainly gotten a lot better about making more of their information drop downs, pre-selects, and they've gotten a lot better at it as they've invested in it. But particularly way back then, it was, that was a while ago. There wasn't that kind of information. And even when we put in SAP at the manufacturing location I have, we spent a lot of time and money making sure that the information got in. But if it was in and it didn't go in correctly, it was a pain to clean up. But then they also realized then that even though all of our expenses were in there, pulling them out and putting them into models that allowed you to do departmental spending, departmental analysis, that was still being done manually. You had to go in and pull the information out, do a data extract, stage it, put it into this special format so that it can go into some other workbook that some other smart finance guy created to allow you to do your work.
Okay, got it.
And a few weeks ago, I actually had a post that I took from one of the senior leaders at Google, and they said they had somebody working on a project. They had 57 different ways to spell Philadelphia.
57.
So do you really know where your customers are when you can't have a consistent spelling of the city
right
that your customers are buying in?
So thanks for that. And it makes me feel better, because I know that we have messy data. And so if a company like P&G has messy data, that at least we know that it's a universal problem, a universal waste for everybody,
Hmm.
and a huge loss of productivity, I'm sure. So
Yes.
when you come and you work with somebody, can you give me an example of the typical messy data you see that's getting in the way of companies maximizing their growth, their sales growth, and understanding how to grow their business?
Yeah. And there, when you think about messy, there's a couple different things. It is all the examples of Philadelphia, or it's product numbers that change over time, or product descriptions that go with the same number over time. So when you're trying to look at where customers are, particularly if you have a field, a customer field, and think about, you're working with somebody in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Is Fort FORT? Is it FT period? And all this happens with customer names, sometimes even less so with product names.
Uh,
But then a lot of times, if it's not set up in a way that you may have 100 different products that you're selling, but do you actually have the structure that says this this is a shoe that fits in this type of box, or it's a box of two, a box of 10 different pairs of shoes, and all the different ways that you can think about classifying and grouping your data. So, for example, I worked with a distributor, and we had on there some types of cheeses. There were aged cheeses, fresh cheeses, mozzarella cheeses. But then a lot of times we wanted to put in some subtotals in there. Okay, what types of packaging all fit like this? We had to create a separate hierarchy that was outside the system to roll things up in a different way. And so messy can be incomplete. It can be not to the point where it's the information that you need. And it can just be truly, truly messy where you don't have a standard way of calling the same thing every single time.
okay, I can totally relate to that because we're going through a CRM implementation right now, and
Hmm.
I had an opportunity to look at how we were doing that, and we had not only did we have that issue where FT or FORT or whatever, but we also had um, just no standardization to how you didn't what do they say to start with the end in mind? I think
Hmm.
it looked like we started with the start in mind and not the end. Is that typical of what you see?
Absolutely. It was that whole let's get it in there, then we'll figure out what we're going to do with it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, the unfortunate tendency is when people upgrade their systems or put in a brand new one, they think they know what they want, and they end up putting that in and finding out, okay, now to do what we really need it to do, now we need to go back and retrofit all this additional information. In fact, I've got a sheet I should send to you if you're still in the process. It's like the pitfalls of a CRM implementation.
Oh, you
And
definitely
one of
need to
them,
send me that. Yes,
yeah,
please.
because and it really is, really got to do it across the board with a um, long-term perspective. And but at the very least, you have to have a project team that represents the entire organization. Because the first cut of what we did when we built the CRM system with the cheese company is that the marketing team wanted everything in there, so everything went in. Now you're asking salespeople to do a lot of work where they don't even know how it's going to be used.
Hmm.
And oh, by the way, we didn't necessarily initially involve the sales team, and so we created something that was very user unfriendly to them. You know what happens to user adoption when people don't see the benefit or the what's in it for me?
Right.
And the biggest thing of it is you got to think about the cultural change, particularly now if you're working with a lot of salespeople who's used to it's my customer, my data. Now you're telling me I have to open up all my stuff and somebody else can change my customer's data.
Right.
Oh my gosh, that was the hardest thing. So we developed a complete working team that really involved IT, my sales operations group, a sales leader, and a couple different salespeople, and a marketing person or two. So no matter what we did, Everybody was hearing the what, the why, and the how. So at the end of the day, we were able to roll out a CRM system built for salespeople by salespeople. Not 100% true, but you get the idea.
Sure, sure. But it also worked for everyone else too that had to rely
Absolutely.
on the data that was being put in.
Yes. And you would say, hey, we wanted to see this. And we had a phenomenal woman who was the programmer here. And on her break, she would say, okay, I listened to what we talked about for the past 2 hours. And I did this. Is this what you were talking about? And it's like, oh my God, real time magic. Because she let people see exactly what we were talking about. And it just got us through the development cycle, and the testing and the design cycle so much faster when everybody knew what they were doing and why.
Lynn, how many, besides, messy data, how often do you kind of engage with people, with a company where someone in the organization, whether it's the owner or whether it's the sales manager or the top salesperson or whatever, is sort of saying, hey, I've, I have a feel for this business. I know what's going on. I know what we should be doing and I know what we shouldn't be doing. I know what's profitable. I know what's not profitable. Um, I don't need, I don't need anything more. Is that something you run into a lot? And when you do, if you do, how do you address it?
Getting people over that and to have the chance to address that with them is in reality one of the biggest challenges I face, because we've been successful. We know what we're doing. We're successful, right? So why do we need to do something different? I worked with a VP of sales once, and he always talked about December is the biggest month. Hey, it's November. He starts talking about December and how good it's going to be again. First year, I believed him because I didn't know any better. The second year, I began to question. And the third year, when he started, I say, Elliot, let's do something here. And what I've done is laid out 11 years worth of data, months across the top, and just put a little chart together for him and said, like, if February is bigger than January, February was color coded green. If March was less than February, March was red. Okay, so this was a year, month over month comparison. So we said we look at November. By the time we looked at it, I said, look at November every year, look at December every year. And it was red. Says, Elio, what does that mean? He says, I guess I don't know what I'm talking about, do I? I said, you absolutely do. But when we burrowed down a little bit further, what was really driving his idea that it was a really big, hectic month was all the bad behaviors from salespeople and customers who wanted to buy in the last 2 weeks of the month to get their year-end money. There wasn't a business reason driving this other than the personal rewards that people were getting from it. And based on that kind of, that insight, launched a real long effort that resulted in finally saying, you know what, here's our strategies are going to be based on these seven key measures. Our monthly reporting became part of those same 7 measures, and our sales incentive and trade programs were based on those same 7 measures.
Oh,
You know what happens
alignment.
when everybody's making money off the same relatively few sets of numbers?
Right.
It's amazing things that happen.
Yeah. Alignment.
Absolutely. And that was one of the areas where I was hoping we'd get to. Alignment is one of the biggest challenges that businesses face. How often do you hear that marketing and sales are not on the same page?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Sales and ops not on the same page, right?
Finance and accounting have different
Yeah.
needs,
Right.
and it's that alignment. And that's where good numbers that everybody can agree to does form a bit of a language that keeps people aligned. Because at the very least, how many leadership team meetings have you been where someone says sales are up? Well, from what perspective? From a unit basis, from a dollar basis, from a margin basis, and whose numbers are right? Sales, marketing, or finance?
Right.
And when you have those types of discussions, your leadership team just spent an hour and a half arguing about which numbers are right, and that's like the classic story. But every hour that goes on, it's waste.
Right. So how do you, well, first, before I ask you that question, what, if I'm a owner, manager, entrepreneur, whatever, what questions would I be asking myself that would lead me to say, I need the kind of help that Lynn, the magician, provides? Like questions I'm asking that I can't answer, I guess.
Yeah. So for the first one, people look at their business and they build their sales plans based on largely on, hey, we're going to be up 3 to 5%. Okay, and every organization has that growth target. But when it comes down to what strategies you're employing for that, what are the assumptions behind that? Because if you don't have a strong set of, I'm going to even go so far as say database assumptions of your growth, how are you going to truly understand where you are relative to your plan? Measure, and we're all going to find out in 2021, hey, results look so great, not because we're doing so great in 2021, but because 2020 might have been really, really crappy. And so that's the first thing I would look for is there a solid base of assumptions that are driving your strategies? Because out of your strategies, then that tells you what kind of capability you need to build, and if you're going to deliver the strategy and the capability, what's going to be the cultural impact? I would look and ask myself, do I have an IT strategy for using my data? If I don't, you know, that's going to be an indicator that we should probably have a conversation. If you go to your CFO and you say, you know what, how many projects do you have backlogged, or how many questions do you have about the business you've never been able to get to because you can't get at the data or get to the right answers because of the capability there? So do you have the capability to create new answers? And then I'd say, when was the last time somebody actually brought me something really new about my business that I didn't know or I never thought of? I worked with a company they build 600 homes a year. I've built, I kind of watched one of my houses being built, but I'm not a home builder. They gave me a data set and I looked through 1,000 different homes. And their biggest questions were, hey, our sales are going up, but our profitability is lagging the growth rate of sales. Why is that? And why do we keep missing our cash flow forecast? They gave me 4 separate databases. I mashed them all together and basically said, you know what, over the past couple of years, your clients are trending smaller. I'm sorry, not smaller, younger. Younger home builders build smaller houses. And your process allows them to make all these changes. And when they make a lot of changes, a lot of them are happening past the midpoint of construction. So there goes your closing date. There goes your closing date. There goes your customer satisfaction. There goes your cash flow forecast.
Yeah.
And all that rework of replanning and making late stage changes, there go your construction efficiencies. And so your profits are lagging because you're not getting any better about making the same house over and over and over again. And oh, by the way, it's a smaller house to begin with. And the funny thing is, they knew every single story behind every single house, but nobody had taken apart and put their whole processes all together and showed them, you need to change the way in your market. You need to change the way you sell, once you get somebody in, and you need to put some more structure around your change control process. Wow, those are things that they could then take and really say, we have a plan of what we can do. Okay. Long example, but that's one of my favorite ones.
No, that's great. So somebody's asking themselves those kinds of questions, and then you come on the scene to help them. Walk me through how, what to expect. How does you helping them end up, one, getting alignment with the team, and two, ultimately helping position them to 2x their sales or whatever their goal happens to be.
Yeah, and doubling your rate of growth. People say, okay, I'm going to clarify that. I can't say I'm not going to double your sales. Like in absolute
double your rate
terms.
of growth. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but if you're growing along at at 1.5%, 2%, and you do some other things, doubling that, or if you're at 5%, is 10% out of the realm, because we're going to get smarter about what's going to be really important to your business. And
of course, you double your sales on an aggregate basis a lot faster when you are bumping margin up and sales up the way you say. Okay.
Yeah. So there's a whole bunch of different levers that can come out of this. So the first thing I'm going to do is sit down with the group, kind of walk through an assessment of how they're thinking about their data and their IT strategy for maximizing it. How much money is actually being spent, and where should you look first? And I love to start with a sales analysis, because everyone thinks they know everyone knows their sales. And I will not take away that from anybody. But then when you ask them and say, okay, well, how did you get those sales? And there's only 4 ways to grow your sales, but which of those 4 ways are really working for you? And a lot of times they don't know the answer to that. And then we try to look and see, okay, we're going to try to uncover that. But then when you start doing that, how are your sales coming? What are you trying to achieve? That same base data then becomes a roadmap for what you need to do. And once you start understanding your sales and your customers, because it all comes down to customer behavior, once you understand that, then all of a sudden you can now start laying the cost of those sales and who are your profitable customers, who are your unprofitable customers. Because a lot of small business owners in particular, they think of a sale as a good thing, but not if it's going to severely erode your margin, or where the customer is going to take up so much time that you start neglecting other customers
Right.
or have to add staff to. So these are all the things a lot of times, particularly smaller businesses, really don't figure out. And so from that, I'll say, okay, if we agree to the plan, here's our scope of what we're going to do. Then it's a matter of giving me the data. I go away and I'll come back to you in some amount of time afterwards. Say, okay, this is what I did. This is what I think I found, but I'm not the expert in your business. So this is my perspective, just looking at the numbers. What am I missing? And if now if I have a better understanding, I'll go back and take another look at it. Okay, here's my final conclusions or recommendations and the plan that you need to go forward. And the plan is not going to just be to execute this. It's going to be, how does that plan fit strategy? What capability do you need? What's the cultural change you need to make? Because when you start aligning strategy, capability, and culture, that's growth. The absence of those things leads to the 3 things that are holding your growth back.
Okay, got it. And last question for you. That was really good, by the way. I was taking notes on there. It was really good. How do you? I know people. So people are listening, and I'm actually thinking in my mind. Okay, we bring Lynn in. He starts going through this. Somebody's feelings going to get hurt somewhere, right? Because it's just going to happen. Either I was doing the data this way, and now it's supposed to be this way, or I had this gut feeling about this, and all of a sudden it's wrong. How do you? That's coming. I think.
Mm-hmm.
How do you How do you prepare for that, and how do you get people over that hump?
Well, this is not in any way, shape, or form a blame game where someone's responsible for the bad data, and it's certainly not to suggest that people don't know their business. Because again, that gut, I will always say, trust your gut. But as Mr. Reagan used to say about the Russians, trust but verify.
Yeah, right.
Data gives you that opportunity to verify or really test. And it actually can increase the effectiveness of your entire organization. You start empowering different people, within the body of the organization. Hey, no, you make the decision on this. So don't bring every decision to me, because as a leader, you need to learn to make those decisions on your own. You start saying, hey, put the data together, give me a recommendation, and we'll say yes or no. So you can actually start building that responsibility within the organization if you're doing that. But the project itself, usually data is bad because nobody specifically owned it. Or there wasn't a strategy to make sure along the way that it was that it was consistent, clear, complete, and current. And then the real question then is, what data do you really need? Because your organization, even a small business, is creating thousands of little zeros and ones every single day that represent a potentially new fact. Not all of them are relevant. Not all of them are critical. And so my suggestion would be, hey guys, you know what? Let's start small. Do a small project. And it's not about the data itself. It's about the value you are creating from the data. The value in terms of getting more efficient and effective with your people, your time. You're making them smarter, but they're also making decisions that are making you more money. So it's about the value of what you're getting it. And back up a second. And someone told me, like a lot of it, most of the other assets that you have, they get traded. You buy inventory, you sell it. That's an asset that's being traded. You've got accounts receivable you want to offload. You're trading the value of that accounts receivable to some other organization. Data has value when it's used. And a lot of times, if it hasn't been used before, it's just going to be messy because no one cared. There was no reason to care. It's like telling your kids, go clean your room. Why? I'm the only one who goes in there. Okay, maybe that's true, but clean it up anyhow. They're not going to understand the what, the why, or the how.
Well, Lynn, this has been fascinating. I really do appreciate you making time for us today to share this awesome information and how you can, jumpstart the growth rate for companies and make their messy data clean and usable and actionable. How do people get in touch with you? What's the best way for people to reach you?
The easiest way to find me is I'm all over LinkedIn. So if my profile's out there, have all my contact information, I will tell you right now, my phone number is 920-948-3355. My website is Data2Profit.net, not com, but data, the number 2, profit.net. And my email address is lcorazzi@Data2Profit.net.
Okay. Well, Lynn, thank you so much. And
if I can toss in one more point.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
One more. The beautiful thing about it is, why do you want to do all this stuff? Yes, you're creating value, but along the way, more than anything else, you're creating confidence. Confidence that people are now speaking the same language. Data can get them aligned to, or information can align to, or goals or key measures can align to what's important, but they're going to know the organization better. They're going to know that it's okay for me to say, I don't know right now, but I can go get the answer because the answer is in your data somewhere. For a small owner or a big owner, that confidence, being able to be financially confident, is huge. But the other key thing is, when a small business goes to get a loan, who's going to want to hear their story? It's going to be the bank. And the bank's going to say, explain your 2 years of P&L, explain your forward-looking forecast to give me confidence that I can give money to you. And man, when you're a business owner and you are now funding ready and can tell that story, you've got all the confidence in the world.
Well, thank you for putting that in there. That was an excellent way to end. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much. Now, it's been fun. I appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you, and would love to be able to follow up and answer any questions. And I will definitely send you that guidelines to CRM implementations.
Okay. Thanks for what you're doing, Lynn.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you for listening to the Working Without Waste podcast. If you like what we're doing, please subscribe to the podcast on our website at www.ercmidwest.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. We'd also be grateful if you'd rate the podcast and leave a review. That helps other people find us and gets the show's value into more people's ears.